Have you ever sat in complete silence and felt a life inside you that wasn't yours, yet somehow it was? Today, you'll meet Nathan Cole, a quiet man, living an ordinary life, until a 45-minute meditation unlocked centuries of memory sealed beneath his skin. This is not a story about belief. It's a journey into the soul's memory. Who is he? Who might you be? It didn't begin with a vision. It began with silence so deep I could hear something remembering me. Nathan Cole had never believed in past lives. He believed in coffee, in Monday deadlines, in his Denver apartment with creaky floors and a decent Wi-Fi signal. At 38, he was a software developer who trusted logic, not lore, a practical man, a man who'd long ago buried the metaphysical under the weight of code and routine. But the dreams were becoming impossible to ignore. They started quietly, just flickers. A burning shape, a girl's voice, footsteps on ancient stone. But now, they were violent, intimate, and real. Every night for the past 2 weeks, Nathan had woken at exactly 3:17 a.m., gasping, drenched in sweat, with the same 5 words ringing in his skull like a bell. You broke the vow, Kalen. He didn't know anyone named Kalen. He didn't know why his heart pounded like it had just run from battle. But he couldn't escape the feeling that these weren't just dreams. They were something older, something waiting. On a gray November morning, after a sleepless night and an unshakable chill in his spine, Nathan did something entirely out of character. He powered down his laptop, turned off his phone, and drove 12 hours south to a silent meditation monastery in New Mexico. No one had recommended it. He just knew to go. The same way you remember the shape of a home you've never been to, but once called your own. The monastery was called St. Lucian's Pass. Built into a mesa cliffside, it overlooked the valley like a forgotten guardian. No signs, no gates, just wind and stone and stillness. Nathan arrived, unsure of what he was seeking. A break from the noise? A rest from the visions? Or answers to a question he didn't know how to ask? He was greeted by a man in loose gray robes. Eyes bright like morning light. Face lined not by age, but by understanding. Brother Eli, he said, offering his hand. You've been here before. Nathan froze. No, this is my first time. Brother Eli only smiled. Not in this life. There were no clocks at St. Lucian's. No phones. No talking. Only breath. Only stillness. Only the self, laid bare. On his second day, Nathan sat under a fig tree in the meditation courtyard. The air was still, save for the distant cry of a raven. His legs ached. His back pulsed. But beneath the discomfort was something else. A vibration. A memory trying to surface. Like a name on the tip of the tongue of the soul. And then, for a moment, everything went quiet. Not quiet, like absence of sound. But the kind of quiet that feels like the world has turned its ear to you. Nathan's breath slowed. In that silence, something opened. He didn't try to chase it. He just listened. It began with scent. Burning parchment, oil, sand. Then a flicker of torchlight. Then, voices. Foreign, but understood. Chanting. He was inside something vast. Stone walls. Archways. Scrolls stacked in sacred rows. A temple? A library? He looked down at his hands. They were older, calloused, and holding a scroll marked with a red seal, shaped like a lion biting its tail. He wasn't Nathan. He was someone else. Someone named Kalen. Kalen was running. The floor trembled. Flames crackled behind him. There were screams, not of pain, but of betrayal. A woman's voice echoed in his skull. You swore to protect the knowledge. And me. He turned. A young woman stood among the smoke. Her eyes, fierce and knowing, locked onto his. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply whispered. You weren't strong enough. The image shattered. Nathan gasped, falling forward in the courtyard gravel. Hands shaking. Breath erratic. Brother Eli appeared beside him, placing a warm palm on his back. You've opened the door, he said softly. But the soul never shows everything at once. Nathan wiped his face. Who was she? What was that place? What did I do? Eli paused, then knelt beside him. Sometimes, the past doesn't return as a story. It returns as a wound, waiting to be felt. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. Not because he was afraid, but because, for the first time in his life, he felt something ancient stirring inside him. Not a ghost. Not a delusion. but a version of himself that had waited lifetimes to be heard. And he wasn't sure which was scarier. That it might not be real. Or that it was. Memory doesn't always live in the mind. Sometimes, it breathes through the bones. The third morning at St. Lucian's was colder than the rest. A thin veil of mist clung to the ground like a ghost reluctant to leave. Nathan awoke before the sun. Not because of a nightmare. But because something in him had shifted. He no longer questioned whether the vision had been real. He knew. He had been someone else. He had broken something sacred. And he wasn't here to forget, he was here to remember. After a silent breakfast of rice and tea, Brother Eli motioned for him to follow. They walked through a narrow stone corridor behind the prayer hall, winding downward into the earth. No lights, no windows, only candles, ancient, honey-colored, with flames that flickered as if they recognized him. They stopped at a wooden door. "This," said Brother Eli, "is where you meet what was left behind." The door creaked open. Inside was a small circular room. Nothing but a mat in the center and an incense burner shaped like an open hand. "Sit. Don't try to control. Just descend." The practice was called the descent. Unlike guided meditation, it had no destination. It wasn't about finding peace. It was about surrender. Letting go of breath, letting go of name, letting go of this life, long enough for the others to speak. Nathan sat, back straight, eyes closed. At first, it was simple. In, out, in, out. Then, time fell away. He no longer knew if he'd been breathing for 5 minutes or 5 hours. He forgot his name. He forgot the monastery. He forgot 2025. Then it began. A single bell, deep and hollow, rang out from nowhere. And with it, a flood. Sights, sounds, emotions not his own. He was no longer sitting. He was standing, barefoot on marble soaked in blood. He held a sword, but not like a soldier. He held it like a man who had just killed someone he loved. He was Kalen again, but not in the burning library. This was earlier. A courtroom, a trial. He stood before a circle of robed figures, faces hidden, voices chanting. The vow was sacred. The vow was broken. At his feet, Mira knelt. Her hands were bound. She was silent, but her eyes, they were not afraid. They were resigned. Kalen had betrayed his order. Not for power, not for greed, but for truth. He had discovered something in the ancient scrolls. Something that defied the doctrine. And Mira, a philosopher, in exile, had helped him read it. They had unlocked knowledge that could free minds. But freedom was dangerous, so they were judged. She to burn, he to choose. Renounce or condemn her. He chose silence. He let the flames take her. And in that moment, something in him shattered. Nathan's breathing became shallow. His hands clenched into fists. His chest tightened with a grief that didn't belong to this life, but felt as fresh as a fresh wound. The vision cracked. He was back in the stone room. Tears on his face, sweat down his spine, but he was not the same. He had seen it. He had felt it. And worst of all, he had understood it. Brother Eli was already waiting when he stepped out. Nathan didn't speak for several minutes. Then finally, with a hoarse voice, "I let her die." Eli looked at him, not with pity, but with knowing. "Yes, and you've carried that weight across lifetimes." Nathan collapsed onto the nearest bench. "Why now? Why me? I'm not even spiritual. I'm not ready for this." Brother Eli sat beside him. "You're not remembering because you're spiritual, Nathan. You're remembering because you're ready to forgive." That night, Nathan didn't return to his room. He walked alone under the stars. The air thin and alive with unseen movement. He wasn't sure if he believed in reincarnation as doctrine. But he knew one thing. There are truths that the mind forgets. But the soul never does. And when silence is deep enough, those truths rise, not as ghosts, but as echoes. And in that echo, he no longer felt haunted. He felt invited. What if your pain today was just the echo of a promise you once failed to keep? Nathan didn't leave St. Lucian's for another 19 days. He barely spoke. He barely slept. But he didn't need to. Because in the silence, a pattern was beginning to form. The visions didn't come only in meditation anymore. They came in dreams, in sudden flashes when his hands touched stone, in the hollow pang in his chest when hearing certain music. Even the scent of cedarwood smoke would send him spiraling into memories that weren't his, but somehow were deeper than anything he'd lived as Nathan Cole. Each memory brought a new face, a new name, but the same weight. He had always tried to save someone. And he had always failed. The first new life appeared in a dream. He was standing beneath a cherry blossom tree, a sword in one hand, his brother's blood on the other. The name he heard was Aoshi, a samurai in feudal Japan. The vision unfolded quickly. Aoshi had warned his brother not to trust the shogunate. But when the betrayal came, it was already too late. His brother died protecting Aoshi's wife and child, and Aoshi never forgave himself. He renounced his rank, wandered the forests for decades, and died alone, kneeling before a shrine he built for a family he could no longer face. The second came during a walk at dawn. He saw Florence, not today's Florence, but a plague-ridden ghost town of the 1300s. He was Luciano, a healer with herbal knowledge passed down from his mother. He had saved dozens, but when the bishop's son fell ill and died, Luciano was accused of sorcery. He remembered the prison, the rats, the fever, the chains that burned more than skin, they burned hope. He had begged, not for his life, but for the life of a little girl in his care, a child who called him Uncle Light. She was executed beside him. She held his hand as the fire rose. The third memory struck like lightning. He was a child. Dust in the air. Kansas, 1935. The Dust Bowl. He was no one, no family, no name, just a runaway who played music in exchange for food. He had a violin, cracked, missing one string, but he played like the wind, like the sky was listening. One day, a woman offered him a home. He declined. He believed his freedom was sacred. 2 weeks later, she died in a tornado shelter collapse. He had seen the warning. He could have gone back, but he didn't. He died from fever days later, still clutching the broken violin. 3 lives, 3 failures, different centuries, different lands, but always the same grief. Always someone left behind. Always a promise broken. Nathan brought the pattern to brother Eli. Why do I keep seeing people I let down? His voice cracked under the weight of it. I thought meditation was supposed to bring peace. All I'm seeing is pain. Eli didn't answer immediately. Instead, he offered Nathan a piece of parchment. It showed a circle. Around it, 12 points, like a clock. Or a wheel. In the center was one word. Samsara. This is not a curse. Eli said softly. It's a curriculum. Nathan looked up. A curriculum? Eli nodded. Your soul is trying to graduate. But first, it has to repeat the lessons it failed. For the next week, Nathan meditated not to escape, but to understand. He didn't just relive the lives. He felt them, their thoughts, their fears, their reasons. He saw that each version of himself had been trying, desperately, to do good. But fear had always won. Fear of failure, fear of punishment, fear of loss. And so each version of Nathan, of Kalen, of Aoshi, of Luciano, had held back. They had withheld truth, withheld love, withheld action, and that withholding became a debt. Not of karma in the religious sense, but of unfinished energy, unexpressed truth, unforgiven self. One night, beneath the stars, Nathan whispered aloud, I wasn't a monster in any of those lives. Just a man who hesitated. The wind answered, not in words, but in warmth. He knew what he had to do. He didn't need to fix the past. He couldn't, but he could forgive it. And in doing so, allow the echoes to fade. So, one by one, he returned to those moments in meditation. He saw Aoshi kneeling before his brother's grave, and said, you did the best you could. He saw Luciano holding the child's hand, and whispered, you gave her love, even in death. He saw the Dust Bowl boy looking out across a cracked horizon, and told him, freedom isn't running, it's choosing. Each time he forgave, the memory softened, not gone, but no longer sharp. Like an old scar that no longer stings, just reminds. By the end of the month, Nathan no longer saw the past as punishment. He saw it as a path. And for the first time in any of his lives, he began walking it forward. Some souls don't meet again by chance. They meet because the story isn't done. Nathan had returned to Denver, but something in him had stayed behind, buried in the earth of St. Lucian's, drifting in the wind between centuries. He didn't speak of his visions. He didn't have to, because life was already beginning to echo them. It happened on a quiet Thursday. Nathan had volunteered at a book fair, part of his slow re-entry into the world. Rows of used novels, paperbacks with dog-eared corners. Nothing mystical. Until he saw her. She stood near the history aisle. Long auburn hair, a gray scarf wrapped around her wrist. She was flipping through a book on lost civilizations when Nathan passed, and in that instant, her fingers froze. She turned, their eyes met, and something ancient snapped back into place. Neither of them spoke, but both of them felt it. A pause, a stillness, a wait. Then she said, quietly, like a breath, "Do I know you?" Nathan's heart pounded, not from fear, but from recognition. She introduced herself as Ava Reynolds, a high school teacher. But in that moment, he didn't hear Ava. He heard Mira, not a name, a frequency. And when she smiled, just slightly, he saw the same eyes from the flames, the same calm defiance, the same soul returned. Some memories don't belong to the mind. They belong to two souls, remembering the same fire. Nathan didn't tell Ava everything. Not at first. He feared she might think he was lost in mysticism. Or worse, projecting. But over the next few weeks, they began to talk. Not about reincarnation. Not about visions. They spoke of déjà vu. Of dreams. Of strange stillnesses. And then, the signs grew louder. Ava mentioned waking at 3:17 a.m. She described a recurring nightmare, a library on fire, and someone calling her name through the smoke. She didn't remember the name. But when Nathan whispered, "Mira," she went silent, and her eyes filled with tears. They decided to meditate together. One Sunday morning, in Ava's apartment, surrounded by quiet plants and filtered sunlight, they sat cross-legged. Backs straight, palms open, eyes closed. The breath was slow. The room grew still. And then, something opened. Together, they saw it. The burning library. The chained woman. The man who couldn't speak. But this time, Nathan walked forward. In the vision, he stood beside Mira. He didn't run. He didn't betray. He took her hand. And as the fire closed in, she looked at him, not with anger, but with release. "You remembered," she said. And then, she was gone. Back in the present, Nathan opened his eyes. Ava's hand was in his. No words. Just stillness. But this time, not the stillness of forgetting. The stillness of closure. Of a soul finally at peace. Some souls are connected by more than memory. They're woven together by purpose. After that meditation, Nathan no longer doubted who Ava was. But a deeper question remained. How many others had he forgotten? How many lives had he crossed? Only to forget them again. Faces fading into fog with each new birth? He began noticing things. A man on the subway who stared too long. A child at the market who whispered, "You came back." A nurse at the clinic who touched his wrist and shivered. They weren't just people. They were echoes. Threads, faint, glowing, pulling. One night, unable to sleep, Nathan revisited a notebook he kept since St. Lucian's. He flipped through the names. Kalen, the scholar. Aoshi, the warrior. Luciano, the healer. The boy with the broken violin. And beside them, he drew circles. From each circle, he drew lines, not random, but connected. Some intersected, some looped back, but one thread ran through them all. Mira, Ava, the girl, the sister, the flame, always her. In every life, sometimes a companion, sometimes a guide, sometimes a loss he couldn't save, but always a signal. She wasn't just his karma. She was his compass. He began meditating not just to recall, but to trace. To see who else was woven into the pattern. And what he discovered changed everything. In one deep session, he stood on the edge of a cliff, not in this world, but somewhere in between. Before him was a giant loom, made of light and memory. Threads of every color moved like breath. Some broke, some faded, but a few glowed steady, pulsing, waiting. And from one thread, he heard a voice. "You are not alone in this remembering." Nathan awoke with tears on his cheeks, not from sadness, but awe. He now understood. This wasn't his story alone. Reincarnation wasn't linear. It wasn't a ladder. It was a web. Every soul touched another. Every bond, a thread. Every act of love or fear, a knot. He saw now that his healing was part of a larger fabric. That the closure with Ava wasn't the end, it was a beginning. He called her that night. They spoke little. Then he asked, "Do you ever get the feeling, we've done this before, not just us, but with others?" Ava paused. Then softly, Every time I meet someone who feels familiar, I check their eyes. I'm looking for someone I lost. Nathan's voice cracked. What if we're meant to help them remember? 2. Ava didn't respond with words. She simply whispered, "Then let's begin. What if your anxieties, your obsessions, your fears weren't just yours? What if they were resonances? Ripples of a story your soul has been carrying for lifetimes?" Nathan's story is not about proving the past. It's about finding peace in the present. So next time you sit in silence, ask yourself not, "What do I want?" but rather, "What am I here to remember?" If this story moved something in you, don't forget to like, comment your experience, and subscribe. There may be a reason you found this video.